war is decided first, then the narrative is told. If this goes wrong, nowhere is safe. So President Trump yesterday threatened that he will end a civilization. Does that count as a risk to the markets or an upside to the markets?
Oh la la. Friends of friends who haven't left their house because they're so scared.
We've always been helpless. We let that happen to us.
The information that everyone's getting on their phones, we were never meant to absorb that much information as human beings.
I'll say it in front of everyone. The US dollar is being wiped out.
Hello and welcome back to the Dream Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Sheen. If everything currently happening in the Middle East has left you feeling anxious, overwhelmed, or uncertain about the future, then this conversation is for you. Today's episode is about understanding your stress, learning how to manage it, and ultimately using it as a tool to transform your life. On today's episode, we are joined by two incredible guests. They're a dynamic duo when it comes to understanding stress and learning how to use it to live a healthier, more grounded life. Gawdat is practical, deeply thoughtful, and known for breaking down complex challenges into clear, actionable solutions. He's a former chief business officer at Google X, as well as a software engineer, entrepreneur, author, podcaster, and public speaker. He's the author of the best-selling books Solve for Happy and Scary Smart. Joining him is our returning guest, Alice Law, a renowned stress mastery and resilient leadership expert. She is a Sunday Times bestselling author and the co-author of Unstressable alongside Mo. Alice works with individuals and organizations to manage stress, prevent burnout, and build what she calls regulated resilience, the ability to stay steady even in the most high-pressure environments. Join us for an incredible conversation. Mo and Alice, hello and welcome on the show.
Thank you.
Alice, it's great to see you again.
So nice to be back again.
I know, I can't believe it's been 2 years.
Always great to see
A
Alice.
lot.
First of all, how did this happen, this duo?
Joyfully COVID.
Oh.
So, fate and COVID. Yeah,
Yeah.
we always say that actually. It wasn't 100% fate, but COVID, lockdown. We were both on we're doing one of those online hangout events for everyone, obviously super stressed. Mo was one of the keynote speakers. I was in a little side room doing a stress workshop. And after my virtual workshop, came to watch yours truly over there and see what was going on. And I hadn't heard of Mo's work at this point and listened to him speak. And I was like, oh my God, this is so interesting. At the time, I had a podcast that was all about interviewing people on the greatest stresses and losses they had to overcome. So I read his book and I was like, oh, he'd be great. And at the time, he was obviously very well known, but not on Instagram. And so I
Still not.
I DM'd him a voice note saying, because everyone was locked down doing podcasts on Zoom. So I was like, would you come on my podcast? This is my story. And he was like, yeah, of course. And so then we spoke for like an hour after the podcast, didn't we? And then you were like, you should come on my podcast. And then we just became the bestest of friends from a distance. And then realized eventually that we actually should write a book together. So
There are those people, I believe, that life wants to bring you together. If you believe in something more than the physical world, there is a soul connection or maybe a contract or an agreement somehow. So the way we feel about each other is very unusual because we're almost family. And, I'd hate to say I have daughter feelings to Alice because that,
why? Because of the age. It makes
because
you
of
feel
the
old.
age, correct. But also, I think we really made a difference together. So I wrote, 4 bestsellers, but the one that most frequently comes up is the one that Alice, and I wrote together. Simply, I think because I'm an engineer, as you know, and so my writing is a bit, to the point. I turn everything into a process and an equation and so on. And if you read Unstressable, Alice comes in with her very, very soft, very feminine side of the topic, which requires that stress, being gentle to yourself, being in touch with your emotions and so on. And I think that really made the work a lot better. I appreciate that. I don't think I've written a book that was so complete on the feminine, masculine side as Unstressable.
Yeah, I have to say I love the book, and I read it last time when we had our interview. But I wish Mo, I've been trying to get you on for 4 years. Every time
I'm
he
not a
tells me
woman,
later,
so I'm surprised
Sure.
I'm here.
I wish we were meeting on a more positive note, but unfortunately, with everything going on right now in the world and in our region, I could not think of better people to call on to help us navigate this emotionally. And since the 28th of when was it? February, right?
28th, yeah.
28th, yes. Yeah. So on the 20th, I actually had an iftar plan at my house, and then I was waiting for everybody to come, and I was unsure if people would come. And then when people came, I packed my food, packed my clothes, and I moved into my friend's house. And that's the first night we got the alerts, right? Oh. And I remember that first time the alerts came on our phones, we all looked at each other with just pure fear and confusion because we've never experienced this. I come from Mauritius, never experienced anything remotely connected to war. And since then, obviously, it's been 40 days now, which is crazy. These 40 days feel like 7 years to me. March was the longest month ever. And what we've been seeing a lot of things. But to start with, I want to ask you guys, do you think we're mentally prepped to go through this much emotional turmoil and just to live through war on our phones every day and being able to even see what's going on?
I think 100% not. And I also think it's actually been really interesting. I've seen a very different spectrum of people and how they're handling it. And something I've noticed partly is that for those whose nervous system was already at that kind of busy, keep going peak, this has kind of broken them. Because not so much because we obviously know we're so blessed to be here and we're so safe in comparison to the horrors that are going on around us. But it's like that straw that broke the camel's back to someone who wasn't regulated and wasn't doing this kind of work before. And the spectrum, I know some people, not personally, but friends of friends who haven't left their house because they're so scared.
Yeah.
And it's like that is the accumulation of stress on top of stress, on top of stress, on top of stress. So it's definitely as well, I think we're as humans, we're not meant to see all this, like you say, continual or an information overload in general, information overload with war in general. And it's kind of now, although we all need to see it because it's, the most horrifying thing in the world, what's going on right now, we have to pay attention. Equally, when your nervous system is at the top of its capacity, if you put something else on top of it, the attention that you're paying isn't actually going to be the right attention because you kind of shut down completely. Mm-hmm. So, it's a very hard, I think, understanding where you are, right? And knowing, okay, should I be watching this at this moment or should I be regulating and then watching it later, for example? And I think I see, a very wide spectrum of people and the difference. And, we've been super calm, as we were saying the other day. And I'm so grateful. I think I'm so grateful. I've been doing this work for, 12 years, essentially, self-studying onwards to 7 years of my career. And the difference I see to how I'm reacting versus some people is purely down to understanding the nervous system and understanding the mind and the body and, the soul, the heart, etc. But yeah, the information that everyone's getting on their phones, we were never meant to absorb that much information as human beings. I can't remember what that stat is, isn't it? About how much information we absorb today versus a broadsheet newspaper once a week used to be. It's now, I won't quote it because it's not off the top of my head, but the percentage of what the information is that we're getting every week in comparison to 50 years ago is cognitive overload, times 1,000. And then we wonder why people can't take in the stuff that they actually need to hear. So it's a really interesting.
I think there was always an inevitability for this to happen. And in a very interesting way, I'm very grateful that it's happening. I mean, it's easy to personalize and look at this as something that's happening to you. Mm-hmm. It's noble to have compassion and think of it as something that shouldn't be happening. That's there are so many that are suffering. There are so many that were lost in this conflict already. I will have to say, if you look at where life is today, where humanity at large, is you know how every difficult situation you've ever been into as an individual is probably one of the biggest contributors to the person that you are right now. It's the learning that you came from, you came out with. It's the resilience. It's the realization of the reality of life. And if I look at this in any objective way, I'll tell you that our world had so much evil in it that was hidden. And, believe it or not, the whole world watched for 2 years as, innocent people were murdered, their city flattened in 4K on social media. And yeah, they sort of were like, what is going on here? But now suddenly that so many people are feeling it, right? That see the rockets passing by.
Yep.
This is no longer a movie. Remember, one of the biggest conditionings of our world is how Hollywood hyper-normalized killing, right? So somehow when you saw someone being murdered on screen, and somehow they told you as if it's a Hollywood movie, oh, but they're the bad guys, you accepted it. One of my genuinely very eye-opening experiences was the movie, now that we're talking to a women's podcast, of Wonder Woman. Have you seen Wonder Woman?
I haven't.
Yeah, thank God you didn't, because the way that movie starts is there is this superhero of a woman who is on the shore of her island, and someone, American, as you can imagine, swims to the shore with others, Germans, as you can imagine, chasing him. And the very first scene is that she asks him and says, why are they chasing you? And he says, and I quote, they are the bad guys. So she slaughters every single one of them. And somehow our hearts don't move. Somehow we believe that they're the bad guys, so they deserve to die. And that propaganda machine has been working in our life for a very long time. And if you ignore all of the detail of how the world's been operating in the last 50 years and focus on the big picture, this last 3 years are the years of awakening. We're waking up. The whole world is waking up. You and I are so much more aware. And everyone listening to us, even if they choose to ignore it, they are so much more aware of the reality of what's happening in the world. And when you start to see it that way, and you sort of think of all of humanity as one organism, then the tough times we're going through right now, and the tough times we're about to go through economically everywhere in the world. So even if you're not in the region with rockets flying on top of you, you're going to feel it in the supermarket and in the petrol pump and so on. And for the first time ever, I think the whole world is getting a message that says, can't go on that way. This cannot continue. Innocent people shouldn't be harmed, right? And in a very interesting way, maybe because I'm older and I've had a wonderful life, I'm simply saying, yeah, I think we should all toughen up a little bit and recognize, one, how blessed we are because the rockets are just on top of our heads, not hitting our buildings. And two, wake up a little bit, because we cannot let that continue. We cannot allow the world to be ruled by a class of people that are openly hurting others and live with it. So with all the pain and uncertainty that surrounds it, perhaps the only side of the movie that I would like to become here is to say, you know what, when I know who the real bad guy is, I'm willing to take a little bit of pain for the real bad guy to be exposed. And I think that's what's happening in our world today.
That's such a good point. And before you came, Alice and I were just discussing this. We were saying how, we've heard about, for example, we've seen what's going on in Gaza, and we all felt it, especially if you're an empath, you feel it. I genuinely cared. We tried our best to do what we can in our power. But now that I've actually experienced what a rocket is like, what an alert is like, the amount of care I care about that has changed. It's really increased. And I thought I was already caring to the max,
Yeah, same.
But now when you experience it to a very minimal level to what they're experiencing, as you said, we're in a very privileged position. But now you start to see the dichotomy of the world. And you see, even here, I feel like, again, we're going to get into this, but there is so much privilege guilt as well. You feel like my life can go on as normal. I feel safe. I am still in the region. Even in the UAE, some people are experiencing it way worse than we are.
For sure.
So then now we are waking up. And that's such a good point you were saying, is that maybe we need to be collateral damage a little bit at this point if it means that the real bad guys are being brought to justice. But all of this can be very overwhelming. Like all of the things you say, I feel like, yes, I do see it. I see the importance of us realizing all of this, and we can do what we want. But there is also this very big feeling of helplessness in this situation. So how do we navigate this? Hey dreamers, quick pause from the convo. If you are wondering what the Dreamers Digest is, it's my exclusive online community where I share behind the scenes goodies, lessons from building this podcast, and all the juicy stuff that never makes it to the final cut. If you're not in it yet, check the link in the show notes and come join us. It's 100% free. Also, shocking fact, 89% of you watching this on YouTube right now are not even subscribed. Wild, right? So if that's you, go ahead and hit that button. It would mean the world to me. And now, super exciting news. We launched the Podcast Academy. This is where I've poured everything I've learned from taking this show to 150 million views and turning it into a real business. It's 10 powerful modules packed with tools to help you launch, grow, and actually monetize your podcasts. You'll even get the chance to submit your episode for personal feedback from me and my team. If you've been thinking about starting a show or scaling the one you already have, this is your sign. Click the link in the description box below to learn more. Now, back to the episode.
Helplessness is the so you know how they say you're never gonna find your way until you realize you're lost.
Yes.
Yeah. You're also never going to be empowered until you realize you're helpless. Okay. We've always been helpless. Understand that. We let that happen to us.
Mm-hmm.
We allowed the world to fool us, to suck us into distractions, right? And we were helpless. We were, in many ways, being manipulated and used, and we were not aware of it. Okay, I think the realization, painful as it is, that you're helpless, is the starting point of telling yourself, so what can I do about this? And I think maybe you and I can cover this like we always do. On the masculine side, helpless is responded to with doing.
Mm-hmm.
The difference between the masculine and the feminine, in its not man and woman, just so that nobody gets upset with me. Masculine and women and feminine is in every one of us, right? They are the traits through which we get things done. Mm-hmm. We navigate life, and the masculine tends to be the doing side. This is why. When a couple is if she's sharing her emotions with him, he will suggest a solution, because that's the masculine. The masculine is like, let me do something
action
about it.
Driven.
Action driven, right?
Yes.
And the feminine is more a state of being, and a state of being does not necessarily have to lead to action, right? So a good example is if you see someone in need, the masculine side of you will have the compassion to help. Mm-hmm. If you see someone in need, the feminine side of you will have the empathy to feel how they feel. It's a state of being. You can give charity, or you can be kind. Mm-hmm. Being is something very important as well. So I'll cover the masculine side of it. Mm-hmm. We're not helpless. We've just been made to believe that we're helpless. And in my culture, in my original religion, Islam, I've studied all religions, but where I come from, if you see something you disapprove of, you're supposed to change it. Mm-hmm. Okay, and the hadith, as we've learned, is you're supposed to change it in 3 ways. One, and the most favorable, is through your actions. The The second, if you can't, is through your words. And the third is at least in your heart. Okay? So you have to allow yourself to say, I feel the pain of others. I wish for them to have a better life. And I texted an ex-girlfriend of mine who's a very, very devout Buddhist. And I said, what was that prayer that you always taught me? And, the Buddhist prayer is, may all beings be free of suffering, right? And even if you're just at that, you've done something that's much better than saying, oh, I'm going to be now suffering, and they're going to wake me up with the alert at 2 a.m. in the morning, and what's going to happen to my gas prices, and so this is so unfair to me. That's actually really not helpful. Now you're really being unhelpful, not only helpless.
Yes.
Okay. And in an interesting way, if you're unhelpful in those situations, you're hurtful. You're harming others, right? But through your idleness. So the three levels are: first, get your heart in the right place. Okay. Tell yourself who is struggling with this more than I am, and genuinely send them love and compassion. Genuinely send them a good wish, and genuinely pray for their safety, for their comfort, for their, for justice. If you can change that with your words, like we do, okay? Maybe I have more in the craft of words, so I'm writing about the topic, right? And hopefully through your action, whether your action is a kind charity for those who have been starved for years now, or a kind, assistance for someone who, like you said, is struggling near us, get in that mindset, because I genuinely believe that if each and every one of us starts to do something tiny, even if it's just a prayer, then we're no longer helpless as a collective. And then there are the emotional sides of it.
I agree with that, but I also look at this as capacity, basically, right? So when someone is stressed and in fear and anger, their capacity shrinks really, really small. And so we have to look at this as, you have this as an example, right? You will know people in your life who are amazing at checking in on you until something goes on in their life and they have no capacity for anything else than what's going on in their own little small world, because they're super stressed. And when we're stressed, we actually go inward and think about me, right? And it becomes very I-centric. So to care about what's going on in this larger region, and to care about, the things that Mo was talking about, and to be able to be, I guess, effective in both your life and the larger world, you have to expand our capacity, and that comes from regulation, right? And so for me, that is essentially looking at the other side of resilience, in less of the, which needs doing. Like Mo said, we're totally yin and yang, and we believe that both sides are completely complementary and are needed for everyone, right? So it's like that, what I call regulated resilience. So resilience in the old term is like masculine, you just keep going, you push through no matter what. Eventually, that means your capacity will come crashing down. And then again, you go back to that, I've got nothing else to give because I can't help anyone. So regulated resilience, as I define it, is basically the ability to go in and out of stress as and when you need, and also to be regulated enough to keep going. It's that thing of knowing when to push, when to pause, when to regulate, when to give yourself space, when to be like, right, this needs to be done. And I think if people can understand that the more they regulate their nervous system right now, the more their capacity expands emotionally, mentally, physically, even spiritually, for other people, as well as their own tiny community. And that is so, so important right now, because if we don't have the capacity for ourselves, let alone anyone else around us, how is anyone going to make a good impact in the world right now? And so it's about, working with mind, heart, body, soul to do tiny bits of regulation. I mean, you and I were talking about this before as well, is the difference between recovery versus micro-regulation, as I call it. A lot of people, when they reach their capacity, it's like, okay, I need some serious recovery. That is like that longer space to say, right, I'm going to go and have a massage and like really actually just get my nervous system completely reset. Micro-regulation is what people need to keep doing in between these moments of recovery, so that they don't keep having to come crashing down and have zero capacity. So that is the tiniest things, as simple as like saying to yourself, okay, at 11 a.m. every single day, that is when I make a soothing hot drink for myself, because the nervous system sees routine as safety. So when your whole world seems like it's upside down and you lose your routine and you forget to go to the gym and you forget to do all the normal, simple things that keep you regulated, it's finding tiny little bits of micro-regulation to bring your nervous system back into a rhythm. So saying, like, okay, that's when I take a deep breath. That's when I pray. That is when I have a hot drink. And that routine in itself regulates. Obviously, there's loads of other different ways. But for me, it's really about realizing where your capacity currently is. And if it's really small at the moment, how do you do the things to expand it? Because that is what's really needed.
And do you also feel like all the external factors that we can't really control, should we also be regulating the intake of that? For example, you know how we're constantly bombarded with news at all times and you can't really control it. But then there's, where is the line in between, I want to protect my mental health and I don't want to look at it, and where's the fine line between also being, I'm avoidant now, I'm trying to forget that this is the reality?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we talk about that even on Stressful with what we call limit, right? Limiting the needless stress in your life. So cutting down as many micro nuisances, micro external stresses that you can. Right now, for example, not having an aggressive factory setting alarm that jolts you out of bed, you 100% should be doing, because you've already got the alerts on your phone.
I updated my alarm to sound like the... No, I'm joking.
It's like, so, all those tiny things really have an impact. We've seen that with the sound, right? With the alert of how your nervous system changes. And so making sure you obviously reduce all the unnecessary stresses, but with actually being informed, like you say, with the news, I look at that as, okay, if you want to be informed about what's going on around you and informed on the wider scale, you'll notice this with everyone who's listening to this will notice this. And I've had so many conversations with people about this now, is if you're looking at the wider news and your capacity is already at its maximum, the reaction to people is, oh my God, I can't deal with this. I can't look at this. I'm just going to shut down. And so if that is your reaction when you're looking at the news at the moment, that is the most obvious symptom that your capacity has been reached and you need to regulate your nervous system. So to actually turn it off for now until you can regulate, and then you can go back into it from the space of actually being able to absorb what you're looking at the things in the right way, because your biology is there to protect you. You won't even be taking in the stuff that actually will be helpful to you, at the time when your capacity is reached. So it's looking at what your reaction is personally right now. And if your reaction is very much like avoidant, oh my God, I can't, that really means you need to regulate your nervous system to increase your capacity again so that you can.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because my friend literally told me, don't tell me anything that's going on. I don't want to know. And I was like, I don't think that's a good idea. But no, you're right. I think some people just need to clear some of the space, right?
100%.
And then they can absorb more and understand how to let it in.
Yeah.
There are lots of tips, however, in the details.
Please.
Right? So your triggers are coming from two places. One is external, so information that's flooding you. And the other is internal. It's happening within you. You're making up stories inside your head as well.
Yes.
Right? So let's take them one by one.
Yes.
The external stuff, my big advice, just as a very practical tip, is do not watch anything that's shorter than 5 minutes. Okay. I simply when Trump was threatening to wipe out civilization,
I did not sleep.
I slept like a baby. That was the best night's sleep of my life, actually. But I'll tell you why. But
please.
But I'll explain. I'll explain what happens here. First of all, so let's just focus on a few tips that I think are very important. Do not watch short form that is actually there to keep your attention and keep you vigilant. Do watch analysis. So, the Jeffrey Sachs of the world, the Scott Ritters, the Douglas McGregors, and, people who have done all of the, collection of data and who will sit in an interview on YouTube for an hour.
Okay.
And talk about things analytically. And in the analysis, they'll tell you, and by the way, that happened. And, you'll get your news that way. And I actually do give an hour or two a day to stay updated, because they do this on daily basis almost. And I would highlight to people that there are two types of social media. There are the the rivers, the white water rivers, like Instagram and TikTok and so on, that are flooding you with shot after shot after shot. And there is the lake. YouTube is the lake of information. So you can go in there, you can search yourself, and you can say, I'm looking for, analysis around that topic, or I'm looking for one of those speakers. And because of that, you can gain a lot of knowledge that settles you. They'll tell you exactly what is happening. So you're no longer confused and constantly triggered to stay swiping. That's number one. Number two, which I think is really important, is compensate. So I've never watched more comedy in my life than I do now. So I do my 2 hours of analysis, and every evening I close my evening with, a half an hour or an hour of stand-up.
The reel you sent me today was funny.
Yeah, and so I, for my family and my friends, I sometimes send them a short clip of something that's very important to understand around what's happening. But I also more often send them something funny.
Yeah.
Right. And believe it or not, that compensation reminds you that life is still going on, that you're still capable of laughing. Compensate with a hug. It's genuinely the fact that you moved in with a friend. That's oxytocin.
100%.
That's wonderful. And it's very, very interesting that you can have a virtual hug by, talking to someone on a quick FaceTime or whatever. So these to me are in the details of the kind of data that you consume that make a massive difference. Now, the other, as I said, is inside your head. So you get triggers, and then you create stories in your head, and those stories become the stressor, not the news. Okay. And I have a very simple trick. I call it brain time versus practical time. So the idea is that, I'll give you a very simple example. I came late. I apologize. I had a very interesting morning. But as soon as I found out that I was going to be late, I texted you and I said, hey guys, I'm really sorry. I'll arrive at 10 minutes late, and by the time I park and so on. That is one response that is a practical response to the fact that I'm late. Another response could have been that I curse myself throughout the drive like a maniac, okay, and and destroy myself and everyone else, and end up paying thousands of dirhams in traffic fines, and it's the same trigger, okay, but the response is different. One of them is brain time. So these are the incessant thoughts that we allow to run in our heads and endlessly. They sound like white noise, and they're constantly attacking you, and they're not coherent at all, and there is no outcome that comes out of them. When I find myself in one of those incessant thinking patterns, I turn my brain time into practical time. And practical time in the future is planning. Okay? So you simply say, okay, so when February 28th, all of my loved ones here were asking the question, should we leave or should we stay? Okay? And I simply said, look, I've done my analysis, and I believe that I would like to stay despite everything that's happening around me, and I will revisit that again in Eid. Okay? And then I will revisit it again in, mid-April, and I will revisit it again. And once I've made the decision that I would, that I know why I chose to stay, you can, by the way, also choose to leave if you want. But you have to make up your mind with the information that I currently have. This is my current plan. I'll stick to it until one of two things happen. Either I hit a deadline and it's time to revisit, or I get new information that make me revisit, okay, recalculate things. But don't keep incessantly analyzing the same thing over and over. You got the data, you turned it into practical time, and now right? You don't need the background noise anymore, because you have a decision to remind yourself of, saying, yeah, I know you brain, you want me to analyze everything, but we've done that. Do you have anything new? If you don't, we've decided. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that requires you to sit with yourself, sit with your loved ones, and say, look, this is happening, that is happening, and our decision is, boom, and you're done.
See, I like this. And I also like what you talked about, and that has stuck in my brain, which is the kind of like decentralizing it from us. It's not just about us, right? Let's think about the bigger picture. Let's think about everyone around us who is going through it. And yes, we found the tools to kind of like regulate ourselves in order to navigate the situation better. And I love what you just explained in terms of making a decision. I actually went through that process because I went back home for Eid and everyone was saying you should not come back. And the mistake that I make is I ask a lot of people for their opinion. And now I'm overwhelmed because everyone has something different to say. And I realized that I need to make a decision because at the end of the day, this is about my own safety, how I feel. So will I feel okay being back? Does this make sense to go back? And I made the decision and I came. Then after everything, I came back and everything is happening. I'm like, well, nothing has changed technically from the input of my decision.
Correct.
So I'm going to stay put until something changes and I need to recalibrate. But now I'm going to tell you what the main issue is with the decentralizing. Why are we focused on ourselves, right? And I thought this was a me problem, but yesterday I posted on my story asking people, what is the main thing you're struggling with? And everybody seems to be in different formats telling me the same thing, which is that we internally, what we're focused on is mostly to do with like our careers, our money, like whether you're employed, you think, oh, am I going to lose my job? Are they going to cut my salary? And if you're an entrepreneur, you're thinking, can I pay salaries this month? No money is coming, no revenue is coming. So somehow we're in such a consumer world, we're so materialistic that even for me, I was embarrassed to feel that way. But my main focus was what's going to happen to my business, what's going to happen to my brand, what's going to happen to everything that we've built. We're not thinking that there are bigger things at play here, including our own safety, right? And the safety of the people we love. So then what would you say to everyone who is worried about this kind of thing? And, when you will think that there's so much more in the balance here. How are we going to recover financially? How is the economy going to recover when we should also be worried about, well, what about safety? What about all of this? How do we care about the people who are in worse situation than us? It's such a weird place to be in.
So I wrote a piece the other day, 5 days ago, in one of my 2 books that I'm currently working on, which blew my mind, to be honest.
Oh, please blow mine as well.
It's something we all knew, but when I wrote it that clearly, it really changed something in me about evolutionary biology, right? So in evolutionary biology, depending on the complexity of a living being, its ability to relate to others is dependent on how mature and intelligent it becomes. So, if you're an amoeba, all you care about is your own survival.
Right.
Okay, and so you just try to multiply, and that's it. If you're then the 3 concentric circles, as they call them, one is called kin selection, the other is called reciprocal altruism, and the third is called expanding circles. Okay, and once you see that, it explains a lot of things in the world, including why the perpetrators of our time are always thinking of themselves as victims, right? It's quite interesting, because if you're threatened, you tend to go down the evolutionary biology ladder to the center of it. Okay, so if you're in an immediate and present danger, you tend to behave like a reptile.
Okay.
You're immediately saying, look, I need to be safe first before I care about anyone else. Attend to yourself first before you help others, right? If you're in a situation where unfortunately, if your programming, if your upbringing, if the stories that you've been told when you're younger, like the evil perpetrators of our world today, we are different than everyone else. Everyone else is against us. You start to think and say, so I'm only going to protect my kin. Okay, it's if they have to be within the same exact identical genetic. So people would worry about normal humans would worry only about their immediate family. Okay, anyone else doesn't matter. So my daughter matters, but everyone else doesn't matter. But that's a very, very primitive way of a survival machine, right? You go a step further and you're more developed and more aware of the reality of how to be in the world. You start to look into what they call reciprocal altruism, which is, I will help you out because I know you'll help my daughter out. And then, and you can see in developed societies that we hand, we give a hand to one another. Typical in our Middle Eastern classic societies in Egypt, where I grew up, for example, is we had no welfare, we had no medical, free medical care or whatever, and nobody worried at all, because you knew that if you got in trouble, your cousin or your friend or even your neighbor in the street or some stranger will lend a hand. Okay, and the stranger lent a hand because they knew that if they got in trouble, you would lend a hand, or someone else would lend a hand. That's a more advanced, more mature, more developed form of biology, right? And then once you cross that, you start to expand your circles. And of course, the ultimate circle of those is to look at all being. Okay, is for an idiot to say, I'm going to nuke a civilization, and you not only worry about the other, okay, or feel compassion to the other, you also feel compassion for the environment, for all of the, unassuming birds and trees and everything. That's very, very, this is what the environmentalists will feel. Now, so why am I explaining all of this? Because first of all, it explains that victim mentality. That to me was very eye-opening, that it's a very, very primitive form of development for the perpetrator to think that they're a victim. Okay? And now I understand that it's almost biologically ingrained within them. But more interestingly, it's because if we want to elevate ourselves to a higher form of being, we need to go through those circles. And it goes through that exact same way. For you to first remind yourself that you're safe. Okay? Then you go from the amoeba to the squirrel. Okay, and now you can help other squirrels, but not cats, right? And then you become a little more developed. Now that you know that your fellow squirrels are safe, you start to think about the next circle and the next circle and the next circle, right? And once again, I know I sound boring today, but the idea is you can practically go through that thinking by sitting down with a paper and saying, "Am I safe?" Okay, and if you're not, prove it to me. It's 40 days. You've never been in a difficult, have you witnessed any debris, or you see it on social media, but your life is normal. You drive normally.
Right.
As a matter of fact, there was this very interesting stat that because the streets are less busy, accidents are less, and people are safer.
Yeah.
Okay? So and you have to admit, whatever your position is on the position of the UAE, they've done an incredible job, keeping everyone safe, even in the most damaged places, like in Bahrain, for example. The Bahrainis themselves, my friends, they say, yeah, we it's very loud because Bahrain is small, but we're not affected. So keep reminding yourself by genuinely asking yourself the question, am I safe? Now, if I am safe, then can I be better than an amoeba and then worry about something bigger than I am? And how big can I go? And believe it or not, that's again oxytocin, to feel connected to others. By definition, makes you feel that others are connected to you. And that in itself is a very calming approach.
Yeah, I think it's very true. And it's also, though, to add to that thing of am I safe, right, is to actually program the body to remind it that it's safe, right? Because we have the mind-body loop. And right now, when we go into this incessant thoughts and thinking of, okay, what's that? What's going to happen then? Or what if, like the stress brain does, it'll think of every bit of fiction and not the facts. When we can control our mind and say, like Mo's most famous one is brain, bring me a useful thought. I have been telling people at the moment as well, it's like, brain, bring me a calming thought. Right, so direct what kind of thought you want. But after that, you also need to regulate the body. Otherwise, we go into this mind-body loop to be like round and round and round, because where the body goes, the mind follows, and vice versa.
Of course.
And so to direct the brain to say, okay, right, I am safe, bring me a calming thought, then regulate your body to tell it that it's safe, because the biology has been set off to say we're not safe because of the brain with all your thoughts, right? So your brain will have set your stress response off from thought alone, even when you're physically safe. So then it's actually doing the things to remind your body, no, it's okay, you can go back into parasympathetic states. So something as simple as the physiological sigh, for example, which is one of the, studies have now shown, it's like Huberman, Professor Huberman says that's the most effective one to bring your body out of stress response breath-wise, is to do, I'll do it, embarrass myself, but I'll do it. So it'll be like sipping in and then at the top and exhale. So you breathe in through your nose and a long sigh out. So it's like you think you can't take any more air in at the top. You do one more sip in through the nose and then a deep exhale. You do that just 3 times minimum and your body goes into parasympathetic state. Do it for 3 minutes and you'll feel completely different. So if we can all...
Does work.
It does. So if you can, like Mo said, remind yourself that you're safe, then direct your mind and then regulate your body to tell it to not go back into this stress loop, you'll expand your capacity again, essentially.
Fun fact on that topic, when you talk about the body controlling how we feel as well, do you know that a lot of people who have Botox in their foreheads, they stress less than others because they can't frown?
I've heard this. Yeah, the studies are showing
there are studies that show it because they can't frown. So then their brain is not affected as much from like external factors.
Yeah, because the opposite of that is true. I call this the smile meditation. Is that because, for example, you can't put a frown on your head, then your body can't stress in that way.
Yeah.
Then you can do it with putting a smile on your face. If you close your eyes and you're feeling low in mood, close your eyes, physically put a smile on your face and just sit there for like 30 seconds. Your brain will release those feel-good hormones like dopamine and serotonin because of the expression of your physiology. And you'll feel that flood of happy emotion. I always end up laughing to myself with my eyes closed because it literally has that effect.
That's good. It's laughing therapy, isn't it?
There was a very famous experiment where they used pencils. So they would give half of the participants a pencil, which forces, I don't remember the name of the smile.
It's the muscles in the face,
but the muscles
right?
feel that way. The body works both ways, right? So if you put it in a happy state, relaxed state, it relaxes you, and the opposite way, you can it stresses you or you can stress it. And I think you speak a lot about that.
I think it's also on that topic is to remember right now, if you're like thinking, okay, you've just been dealing with stress a lot, you will notice if you actually pay attention that your jaw is like clenched most of the time, that your shoulders are up. Yeah. And so to consciously every day take a deep breath and like roll your shoulders back and drop your shoulders, open your chest up. Like they have those studies, for example, of people saying do a power stance before you're going on stage, right? It's because your body really can tell your brain and your emotions what to do. So it's like, okay, dropping your shoulders, consciously unclenching your jaw.
Drop your tongue,
Drop your tongue, even like do that. I will embarrass myself now, but do that thing where you get like every single day.
It is embarrassing what you do.
Thank you. People will be like, well, how do they do that?
Don't do that in public.
She's helping.
I'm helping. Okay. And just actually shaking as well. So full body, I call this a zebra shakeout in the book, is that, what does the zebra do when it runs away from a lion? If it manages to get away, it will do a full body shakedown, same as a dog fighting with a dog in the street. We're no different with our physiology. So we can tell our body the threat is over, again, by doing a full shakeout, like standing up, arms above your head, every limb. Just shake out for 30 seconds or more. And again, your body will say, okay, fine, we're safe.
Well, Mo, I have a bone to pick with you.
Go for it.
Because I watched you on...
fight dog in the street.
We'll shake after.
Yeah.
But I watched you on Steven's podcast, and that was a year ago.
I'm sorry.
And
Okay, next topic.
And at the time, you had already mentioned that you did this whole analogy that people think they might be safe investing in real estate in Dubai, but then what if Iran and the US go to war?
Did I say that?
Yes.
Shit.
You did. It was him. and I feel like, first of all, why did you not warn us? But secondly, like I feel like this has been something coming for a long time.
Yes.
But you personally, did you prep yourself for this any differently than all of us? Because I feel like even though I am aware of politics, I never thought this would happen to this extent.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Oh my God, where have you been? I have prepped quite a bit. Financially, for example, I've had a standing instruction in my bank to buy gold every single day for 3 years now.
Okay.
Tiny amounts, but I'll say it in front of everyone. The US dollar is being wiped out. Okay, from one side because of their self-sabotage, but at the same time they are there are many people in the world that want them to fail, right? And again, that's because of their self-sabotage. And so yes, currency is not safe. Markets, it depends on how much of a gambler you are. Crypto, it depends on how aware you are of what crypto actually is. Okay, none of that has any validity within it. None of that. If you understand the depths of why the bond market and why the stock market and why crypto existed, it was to serve the petrodollar agreement. It's the fact that the US has been printing dollars since forever. And in any normal nation, that would have meant that their market would suffer massive inflation. But they've exported the inflation to us by basically saying, every nation in the world needs to keep a reserve of dollars.
Yeah.
And when you're done buying oil for the reserve that you have, instead of sending it back to the domestic US market and buying businesses or real estate or valuable things, send it back to this repository place that we're going to call the stock market. That's a virtual environment, so that so that the dollars we printed are tucked away and not affecting the U.S. citizens, so we can continue to consume and hurt the planet and be bigger in size and drive bigger cars and everything. Right now, if you understand that, you have to say, well, it might not end tomorrow. It might not end next year, but sooner or later it's going to start to struggle. And when you get a president that makes a tweet every Friday to prop up the markets, every Monday to prop up the markets and say everything's okay, and then starts an attack on his enemy over the weekend, clearly this is not a normal market anymore. This is very much, unless you're a very good friend of his, you're probably going to be surprised one day. And I just don't know what to tell people other than that there is reality that happens. Unfortunately, most of our knowledge comes from English. Okay, one of the things that AI has made a massive difference to me with is now I have my knowledge coming from everywhere in the world, right? So anything that anyone tells me, as much as I ask Claude or I ask Gemini, I also ask DeepSeek, and DeepSeek always goes like, "Oh, that's too American." That's eliminating half of the truth, right? They'll tell me another truth that's very Chinese, that's eliminating the other half, right? But now you have a big picture. You can ask questions and say, read history in English, German, Russian, and Japanese before you answer a question about World War I or World War II. Sorry, World War II, right? So think about that. Now, if you're not recognizing how messed up the evil empire has made the world, you're not paying attention. And if you're not paying attention, I genuinely don't know what to do for you. Okay, but the truth is, the world is changing. Okay, and so what's the proper response to a world that is changing? Don't gamble. Okay, don't be stupid and believe the propaganda. Okay, and diversify. Assets and things. At the time when I had that podcast with Stephen, I was reading quite a bit of material of how people survived the Great Depression. You know why? Because what's the likelihood of another Great Depression?
Right.
What?
High.
Very high. Very high. What most people don't, and I'm not saying this to scare people. And once again, I believe that, the way I see things happening here is that they're trying their absolute best to keep the economy going. They're taking measures and so on and so forth. Wherever you are in the world, they may not be doing that, but that's irrelevant because it's one global economy. Okay, and as one global economy, something's bound to change. If oil is double the price and everything depends on oil, if fertilizer is limited in production, what might change is not a very difficult question to ask yourself. And if you continue to behave the way you behaved before that, then I don't know where you're living, right? And it's very simple. I'm not saying stockpile, water bottles, but just allow yourself a tiny bit of what if.
Mm.
What if, what would I lose if I bought a bit of gold and gold went down? And what would I win if I bought a bit of gold and gold went up? And what's the percentage of my portfolio that I can put into that? What would happen if I fueled my car every 3 days instead of every week? Because it's likely that in a week's time, fuel is going to be more expensive than today. Okay. And it's simple things like that. Don't panic, but change a tiny bit. As times change with them. Why did I not say those things back then? It's actually quite interesting that you asked me this question. I'm writing about the topic now. I have this, again, Islamic background, which is فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرًا أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ, that I will only speak when I feel that what I know is actually true to me. Until it's true to me, I shut the F up. and at that time, I had very deep suspicions. I remember in that podcast when I told Stephen, but Stephen, this you're not noticing. War is decided first, then the narrative is told.
Right.
Remember that?
Yes, okay? I remember.
And I genuinely remember when I was sitting in his studio, I was like, why did you say that? This is, but now I'm a little more vocal about things with respect. But it is not a secret that there is, as the Iranians call them, the Epstein class. There is a bunch of people in the world that don't want your benefit, you and I.
100%.
And so, you might as well want your own benefit.
Yeah. That brings us to a very interesting point. You mentioned earlier as well that, the UAE is dealing with this well. And even though you knew about this a year ago, you anticipated this, you still chose to be in this region, right? Yes. And we're both here. You recently moved as well. I've been here for a few years. But one thing that I've been dealing with, and I'm sure you are as well, as someone who recently moved, is that a lot of people are now saying, oh, why are you choosing to live in that region? Like, what is plan B? When are you going to leave? How do we deal with people who, it might be, kind of like shrouded into, it might be caring, shrouded into a lot of confusion and judgment. But how do you deal with people who question, why are we in this region?
I'll answer in a very short answer and then leave it to you. If this goes wrong, nowhere is safe. Okay?
Facts.
So yeah, that's a fact. If this goes wrong, because evil is playing for their agenda, not the agenda of humanity, nowhere is safe. Everywhere is going to be hit slightly differently. Okay? So there is a very, very high value to certainty. Okay? What you know is better than what you don't. What you've invested in is equity that helps you through times of uncertainty. Okay, and if you study, as I told you at the time, I was studying what happens in the Great Depression, or other things. I just have time to study. So basically, so the idea is that the things that really make a difference in tough times have very little to do with your location. They have a lot to do with your attitude. They have a lot to do with your circle of support, and they have a lot to do with your with the compassion that exists within that circle of support, right? And once again, what you know is better than what you don't. Now, this doesn't mean that everyone reacts the same way. I have a very dear person to me who panicked massively and had to leave, right? And yes, that's her makeup. That's the way she looks at things. And I was very supportive. I said, yes, you're much better in a place that doesn't trigger all of your impulsive reactions. But the truth is, doubling down on what you know, adjusting a tiny bit within your assets and within your and assets are, I don't mean that you own properties or whatever. Assets are, I know the streets. Assets are, I have friends. Assets are, I have established enough of a living and so on. I think that's much more impactful. And I will openly tell you, you asked me why, because I'm genuinely proud of this region. I've been completely at awe as I started, when my son Ali left our world in 2014, I went to Saudi. I remember after a couple of months after that, and that was my last time for a very long time because I moved to Google X. I was more in California. I wasn't related to the region. And then I visited Saudi again in 2021, 2022, right at the end of COVID. And the progress and the openness and the number of women that were so empowered and so intelligent and so, handling top positions, and the change that you could see in the economy and the change that you could see in the attitude of people everywhere in the region. There is absolutely no doubt that before this blip, this region was on a trajectory to be one of the most influential regions in the world. And maybe ask yourself, why is this happening? And maybe that's one of the answers. Now, the trick, so that's one side. I'm so sorry I expanded, but I'll shut up right now. The other,
that was the short answer.
Yeah, the other side of this is quite interestingly, do you owe anyone anything? Okay? Because if it's all about you all the time, and you don't internalize the idea of, but I've been given so much by that community, it's my time to give back. In an interesting way, if that's always your attitude to life, eventually you realize that you're always on your own, because you're always fighting for yourself, but then the world itself, karma, is not fighting for you. Okay, and I we were talking before we started that I just renewed, I just moved my car workshop to a much bigger space, much bigger investment, 20 days after the war. Okay, and simply because, you know what, we also have a role to play. Yes, so what if I lose money for a year? We all know that it will come back, but there is that element of, but I have a role to play. I have 30 people working there. I have families that are my responsibility. Let me go away from being the amoeba or the squirrel to actually playing my role.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting, isn't it? Because we were talking about this before, and I was laughing with a friend actually about it the other day, how without meaning to, obviously I lived in London, I'm British, I've been there my whole life, and I fell in love with this region about 4 years ago, thanks to yours truly over there, coming in and out for work. And the moment was like, you'll move here eventually. I was like, will I? And then it just made so much sense. And I was like, I can't not. And it just was something I really wanted to do. And now so many people have said to friends of mine and me, like, when are you coming home? And I'm like, I'm sat in my living room. So I am home. I'm literally sat in my living room. And we were laughing about it the other day. We've been like, yeah, I get that question as well. And I think it's what I keep saying to myself is, and to friends who've like struggled with this kind of polarity of, what's happening, being said around it in the UK versus what you're feeling around it here and what you want, is kind of, I ask myself, like, what do I actually believe in for my life, right? What are the things that I truly believe matter? And for me, this region, still, I see that so much more here than I do back home right now. I hate to say that to the UK, but it's just the truth. Like, I believe in being able to walk down the street as a woman at night and not worry about my safety and have my headphones in. I cannot do that in London, right? And haven't been able to do it for quite a few years, and I believe in, opportunity, and I believe in community, and the extension of that you get here, even though this is all still going on. If anything, I've seen so many people say this has made them feel patriotic to a country that isn't even theirs in a way that they didn't even feel they knew they were patriotic about, right? And it's such a nice thing to see, even how much this has created such an amazing sense of community that you knew was there, but now you feel it in just kind of the tiny interactions you have with people and the extended kindness and the thoughts everyone has around, okay, well, that person's business, or how can I help that, or different things. And I think, yeah, it just goes back to, okay, what do you actually believe in as a person? And does this region still give you that sense of what you can believe in, what you can achieve? And it definitely does for me. I mean, I always think, I said to Mo the other day, I was like, stress management couldn't be anywhere more.
I know, like, I was just about to say. Alice picks up the phone the first day and she goes like, what are we going to do? I'm like, what's going on, Alice? We have a role to play. That's really cool.
That's really cool.
I know, and yeah, I think you did quite a bit since then. Yeah.
So, I said to myself, I was like, well, God put me here in this place for the reason right now. And I was like, I'm literally the epicenter of stress in the world right now. So in whatever way we can help, which we've done 3 initiatives in the last month, and thinking of doing different things and how we can help, businesses and corporations and the individual. And it's like, yeah, I have a role to play and I'm happy to play that role here, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I really like this. And I think all of us are trying to find a way to give back in this moment and support the ones that really need it.
Yeah.
But I'm going to pivot this question a little bit to a more tricky one. So, I feel like we are sat here, we are saying that, we won't make money this year. We can lose some money this year. And then next year, we know the money will come back. But all of this seems almost like we're sitting in a very privileged position where we feel like, we can navigate this. We will survive okay. But there are a massive number of people who are losing their jobs and are being forced to go back to their country. Their families are depending on them. So to the people who might immediately feel the struggle of financial struggle or, losing their job, losing their roof, like how can we help them to navigate this situation?
عسى أن تكرهوا شيئا ويجعل الله فيه خيرا كثيرا. Do you know anyone who has never lost a job?
No.
I've lost a job.
Yeah.
So there you go.
No, I haven't actually.
I have.
Okay.
Right? More than once, actually. I mean, it's quite interesting. In my career, sometimes I disagreed with the value set of my company and accordingly had to be discharged. Okay. Proud to have been discharged. So other times, the thing moved on and it wasn't for me anymore and so on. And it's not unfeeling of me, or, it's not lacking of empathy and compassion. And, it is a tough time for a lot of people. But it happens. And the stats are actually quite staggering. We all survive. We all figure out a way. If you take the worst places on earth, like New York City, for example, how many people lose their jobs and end up being homeless? It's not that high, okay? As a matter of fact, homelessness is usually not the result of losing a job. It's the result of a government bill or a being tricked into losing your money or whatever. The reality is life goes on. Life has to come with a few challenges, and maybe that's one of your allotted tests in life. Okay. Now, the more interesting side of this is incremental impact. So, the Stoics taught what they termed as the dichotomy of control. It was made famous by his name, Covey. So Covey spoke about in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, spoke about your area of influence and your area of concern. But it comes from the Stoics, where the idea of the dichotomy of control is to tell yourself, and again, a paper and pen would be very, very useful. What is concerning me? What is challenging me right now? Write all of them down. And before you jump into solutions or even analysis, ask yourself which of those are entirely outside my control, right? And if they're entirely outside your control, your question shouldn't be, how can I resist this happening? Your question should be, what can I do about them, right? What can I do? In what we in Unstressable we call the happiness flowchart. You can ask yourself the question, what can I do to fix it? But if you can't fix it, then your real question is, what can I do to accept it and make my life and the life of those I care about better despite its presence, right? And that is incremental impact. The idea is, if you know that you're losing your job, stop thinking about losing your job and start thinking about how are you going to manage your budget? What's the most effective way of doing it? How can you find other forms of income, or maybe it's time for you to do something else for a while. Is it cheaper here or it's cheaper there, and so on and so forth, right? And yes, that might not make it not hurt, okay? But it will definitely make it hurt less. And I think that's the whole idea, is that instead of being stuck in the incessant thoughts of, life is unfair, life is always unfair, but that's what makes it fun.
This is exactly what I was filming a video yesterday, and that's what I said, is that we were never guaranteed that life will be fair.
There was no service
There
level
is divine
agreement.
justice, but life is not fair.
That's an interesting argument.
It's like that question of, I wrote that in the book, didn't it? It was like when some people will say, why me? Why me?
Yes.
And it's like, why not you?
Yes.
There's nearly 9 billion people in the world. Why not you? Right?
Yeah.
So every single one of us will have our own spiritual challenges that are actually meant to happen for us, And I think, like you say, it's like the practical side of like, we do what we can. And then I think we just always have to go back to that faith of, if you have faith, which I know a lot of your audience do, the larger part, actually, I think, which is amazing, is if you have that faith, then can you have faith in knowing that you're actually meant to be where you are right now? And can you have faith in knowing that what's unfolding, to not give yourself, like we call in the book, spiritual stress, which is resisting life and God's plan in that moment by being as human as possible, trying to change the unchangeable, and actually just doing what you can in those practical ways, like Mo said, and then really tripling down on your faith and certainty that you are where you're meant to be, and that God will guide you in the right way.
Yeah, God's got you.
Yeah.
I wrote this actually in my first top actions when this started to happen, is that idea of loving God's plan. That actually is quite an interesting thing, because I used to, when I wrote Solve for Happy, I wrote something that was a thought experiment called the eraser test. So basically, at the time, I was still chief business officer of Google X, and I pretended that we, built a technology that can erase a moment in your past. It doesn't erase the memory of it. It would erase the memory completely out of space-time.
Oh, wow.
And when Solve for Happy was published, I was still chief business officer of Google X, and so I was teaching around the world, including at Google, and and I ran that experiment with almost 20,000 people face to face, right? And I would tell them, pick a moment in the past that was very painful for you. Remember it really well so that you feel the pain. That's important and necessary for the experiment to run. And then we will queue up here on the left so that you can use the eraser to erase that moment out of your past. And everyone queued on the left. And then I would say, oh, but by the way, I'm really sorry, I haven't mentioned. If it erases that moment in the past, it will erase everything that came as a result of that moment. It will erase the friend that you made, the learning that you had, the resilience that you've gained, and so on and so forth. And genuinely, 99% of everyone on the left would sit back down, right? And that's really quite interesting that, think of how many difficult moments in your past felt horrible at the time, but feel incredible now. Okay? So if that's been the case for most of the painful experiences of your life, what's different about this one? Okay? It feels horrible now, but it will feel incredible when the time comes. And I genuinely think when you get that clarity, you start to think about the important things, right? And we started with Wonder Woman. But I actually believe that one of my favorite woman as a hero movie in the world, in history, is The Hunger Games.
Yes.
Right?
Oh,
yeah. So the Hunger Games, to me, which a lot of people didn't notice until I told them, if you watch the first one, you realize that this is the first movie in Hollywood's history where the hero, a woman, is not acting like men. She's not beating everyone up to succeed. She uses love to succeed. Okay, which in my heart, it completely got me that she didn't attack anyone, she didn't kill anyone, she wasn't, right? And this to me was in itself enough until the second movie. And probably one of the most important moments in movie history, if you ask me, is when she was going into the arena. So much injustice that they're invited back to fight, and now that they have to kill each other, and they tell her, please watch the movie. They tell her, remember who the real enemy is.
Yes.
Okay? And to me, if anyone has hopefully found value in what we shared and calmed themselves a tiny bit down, use the time to remember who the real enemy is. Okay? Because the real enemy in this entire story that we're living right now are people who allow themselves to hurt young children. Okay? And until you get to see that, you're stuck in the noise of the arena, right? And if you suddenly get enlightened to see that, you realize that, like the eraser test, I wouldn't erase this. This is the very first time in my long life as an old man that there has been any hope whatsoever that those people can be at least exposed, if not defeated, right? And if this is not worth me suffering, then I don't know what is. Okay, you asked me why did I sleep so calmly on the day when he was threatening to erase civilization? Because what a way to go,
right?
Yeah, what a way to go, because it would wake the entire world up, okay, to the reality of who the real enemy is. Okay, and in a very interesting way, and I know a lot of people are gonna thrash me for saying that, I've never been more optimistic. I've never in my life been more hopeful. Okay, because for the very first time in our life, we get people in the US saying, no, we don't want this. Okay, we get people in the US saying, free us. Okay, and I'm not trying to be political here, but truth is, if you allow yourself to attack a nation without proper justification, then you're evil. And we've seen that so many times in our world. It is time for everyone to sit down and say, yeah, I'm suffering. Yeah, I lost my job. Yeah, I'm going to lose money. But you've been paying taxes to an evil bunch your whole life. You know what I mean. I'm not talking about our governments.
I do.
Maybe a little bit of suffering is not a bad thing. Maybe we should toughen up a little bit.
We should toughen up a little bit. No, but this, you know what? This makes me feel hopeful. It also makes you feel like, we are all part of a much bigger mission.
Absolutely.
Much bigger mission.
That's it.
Yeah.
That is when you feel empowered. When you feel empowered when you say, boil this down to away from the detail, there are two groups. There are the good guys and the bad guys. It's not the guy swimming telling you who the bad guys are.
Of course.
Right? Just engage your heart and mind. You know who the bad guys are.
Yeah.
Okay? For the first time in history, there's hope.
There is hope.
Yeah.
This makes it so much better. And you were making a joke about us going with the nuke, and that's the best way to go, a heroic way to go. But even I kept saying this. I was like, if we are collateral damage for the greater good of the world, it's okay. It happens.
100%. Yeah.
It's good.
I'd rather that than, that's the way to go, to be honest.
what else?
I think it's as well, like, when you talk about that as well, like a larger mission, I think something that people can feel alone in sometimes is surrounding themselves with people who don't have that sense. And so it's like finding that those people in your life who do feel that and who do feel part of a larger picture and can see beyond that. And that's what makes you feel connected, right? And feel like you're not alone in it, rather than sort of talking to a brick wall, essentially.
Absolutely. And I mean, we could go on forever, but I guess my final question for you is what is a final message you want to tell people who are experiencing it, whether we are here, we're, going through it at different degrees, we're experiencing it, life might be normal, a little bit weird, or people who are really going through it. What is the one message you would want to take away?
Well, one thing is actually what we say in the book, right? It's not the events of our life that stress us, it's the way we deal with them that does. And I think for everyone in this particular, in the UAE right now, knowing how safe we are in the grander picture and knowing how blessed in so many ways, it's looking at, okay, how are you going to deal with this? Because this is your reality. You can either make this something that brings you huge post-traumatic growth after this, right? And you changes your perspective and you have a higher empathy for, like we were talking about earlier, for people in the wider region. And that's an amazing thing. That truly is an amazing thing. And I think it's really looking at, okay, how am I actually responding or reacting? And how am I going to make this as best a situation as I possibly can, so that then filters throughout my community and beyond?
I think that the the one truth is this too shall pass, as they say. Right? This too shall pass. I think, if I'm not wiped out because of the action of a madman, then I'll have so many stories to tell. Okay, and I really genuinely ask everyone to reflect on what story they want to tell. Right? If the negative side of this is not within your hand, what is within your control, so that you can build a story that you'd look back at and say, honestly, before this, I never could be able to tell people, hey, I watched The Interceptors from my balcony.
Yeah.
Right? It's a story, but there are better stories. And I genuinely question if we're thinking about that, right? Instead of thinking about how unfair it is to ourselves, or what's going to happen to my car. Is my bank account going to decline? Like that reel that's going viral of the CNBC hostess that says, President Trump yesterday threatened that he will end a civilization. Does that count as a risk to the markets or an upside to the markets?
Oh la la.
Like, seriously, people.
Wow.
Seriously. Genuinely need to start thinking of what actually matters. And what story we're going to tell.
Wow. Well, my main takeaway from this conversation has been that, I need to stop thinking that this is happening to me and wish it away. And It's more like, let's just focus on what role can we play in this, because it's such a great mission that is needed. And thank you so much for helping us navigate it internally, but also externally. How can we play a bigger role? So thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks
for having us. It was lovely.